previously on the Maz 500 YouTube channel.
And in today's video, I'm going to be doing my first ever trip abroad. And the reason I'm in Fishguard is that I'll be taking the ferry to the Republic of Ireland.
If you haven't already, please watch part 1 of taking my F-Type to Ireland. Link to that video in the description down below.
So it's day 3 now here in Ireland, and the first thing I've seen out the window is a parking bay full of old mattresses. Back to the car now, and today we're going to go to the west coast, specifically County Kerry.
So we got into the car and headed westbound towards the Dingle Peninsula. This was a very lengthy 4.5-hour journey. Bearing in mind Wexford is on the east coast and Dingle is on the west coast, we had to drive through 6 counties, starting from County Wexford, then to County Waterford, then County Kilkenny, then Tipperary, then Cork, then Limerick, and then of course County Kerry, which is the county that Dingle is in. But that being said, I was absolutely willing to make that journey. One thing I like to do a lot in my F-Type is to do long distance journeys around the UK. I've already done a day trip to the Isle of Wight, and I also wanted to take my car abroad. But because I have a right-hand drive car, and most of the continent drive on the other side, it seemed natural to give Ireland a try first.
That looks like a castle in front of us. What place is that called? That is Granny Castle, and it looks like it's in ruins.
As I was saying whilst I was interrupted by myself, it seemed natural to give Ireland a try first, as they drive on the same side, along with the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands.
So overall this route we're taking is all N roads rather than M roads. It's a lot more rural than built up.
There was a small percentage of motorway on the journey, but only a small percentage compared to yesterday, which was predominantly the M11. And linking to the previous topic about driving on the other side, yes, I have driven in a left-hand drive country, Spain, specifically in La Línea, in a left-hand drive Ford Fiesta, and I also drove it around Gibraltar.
There's a lane closure ahead.
Oh no.
As I was saying after I was interrupted yet again over that tragic news, yes, I have experienced driving on the other side of the road in a Ford Fiesta. However, that was a left-hand drive car in a left-hand drive country. I did not drive my own car there, but I would love to. But Ireland just seemed too obvious to ignore. And here we are driving through a town centre, the town of Moonkyne, which is in County Kilkenny. In a way, the shape and size of this town did somewhat remind me of Morton-in-Marsh. It wasn't exactly very big, not that I'm complaining, and after a couple of roundabouts we were already out of town. And during the entirety of our stay in Ireland, this was the only moment we found some dodgy roads. But other than this one-off, the conditions of the roads here in Ireland have been absolutely spot on. And the biggest highlight of this entire journey has to be the views of these hills. As much as I've been crediting Ireland for their nice, smooth, wide roads, here is the unfortunate moment where we had to take a very narrow country road. Yes, it's a two-way road, only wide enough for one car. almost exactly like the ones we see on our way to Chavenage near Tetbury. And yes, they even had the intermittent passing places. And as tedious as this looks, this is almost exactly what it's like around the surrounding villages of where I live. So whilst in the UK this would be a national speed limit road, 60 miles per hour to be exact, or 97k, thankfully here in Ireland, they did not do their equivalent here, which would be about 100k or 62 miles per hour. I couldn't remember if it was exactly 60k or 80k, which would either be the equivalent of roughly 40 or 50 in miles, so it did seem a bit more sensible in that regard. But still, I did not take it anywhere near the speed limit. As the roads were getting narrower and narrower, we had to make slower progress, but at least we were enjoying the scenery, and we were not too far from our destination. We were already in County Kerry, which meant we only had this one county left to cross. And whilst we didn't film it, we did pull up at a petrol station for a quick bite to eat. Not much, but it was enough to get us through. As I've mentioned, we have been travelling very far. So once we did find ourselves in another small village, we did pull up into their local park and performed Salah. But straight after that, we were back on the road. The narrow roads did eventually end, and we did find some wider roads.
Okay, finally in the Dingle Peninsula now. I'm passenger right now at the moment, but otherwise the view here is absolutely breathtaking. Here are some hills to the right.
That meant we were on the final stretch of our journey.
That's can't be Atlantic. It is the Atlantic.
Much to my dad's disbelief, yes it was.
So we're in Inch now.
Inch, unsurprisingly, is home to Inch Beach, which is a 3-mile long sandy beach, which actually allows cars to be driven directly onto the sands. But there was another beach I wanted to see first. Even though we were in the very peninsula that I wanted to see, the exact destination was yet another 25 miles, or 40 k's, which meant it was another 45-minute drive. We even drove through Dingle town, which did look very nice, and I did consider stopping here, but the final destination was my top priority, and since we still had to come back this way, we decided to visit Dingle town after our initial destination. One of the biggest surprises is, even though we are still in the very same Dingle Peninsula, the landscape has been varying dramatically for the next 40-odd minutes, varying all the way from long straights to winding roads, and from open-air scenery to lots of green hills, and from luscious greenery to the Atlantic Ocean. Sometimes the scenery will just be full of grassland to a sudden spike in trees. But despite all of that, we still saw the odd building here and there.
Okay, we're nearly at our destination. Forgot the name of the beach already. Communal Beach. Hopefully I said that right.
Communal Beach.
We're nearly at our destination.
And here we are continuing on with the long, narrow road towards Communal Beach. And even though the long, narrow country road looks like it would never end, I was absolutely determined to get to Communal Beach, park my car up there, and take photos by the Atlantic coast. After countless views of hills, crests, and greenery, eventually we see the Atlantic Ocean right in front of us. And genuinely, it was a sight to behold. And whilst I enjoyed my time out in Dublin throughout the day consistently, this one, because of its long 4-hour journey from Wexford to Dingle, this one did have me hesitant I have seen photos and videos of Cumnal Beach on the internet, and I was keen on going there after seeing numerous videos. But due to lots of long, narrow country roads, I was somewhat hesitant. However, the moment I got there, and I can honestly say, it was the best experience I've ever had. And I would definitely love to come here again. I would have loved to have seen Dunmore Head, Ireland's most westerly point, but it was already late afternoon by the time we have arrived. And here comes our descent. And look at that breathtaking view of the Atlantic Ocean. And for anyone curious, yes, you are allowed to drive down there.
Don't end up in the sea.
Of course not.
Oh? That's it.
So here it is, the very reason why I wanted to come to the Republic of Ireland, Cumnal Beach. Located on the southwest point of the Dingle Peninsula. It was a little busy and a little windy, but the overall experience is most definitely memorable in a positive way. And since we were allowed to drive down there, I managed to get pictures of myself and numerous pictures of the F-Type. And I know I'm repeating myself, but this is right next to the Atlantic coast. And the Atlantic is the world's second largest ocean. This was a big deal to me because previously I'd been to the Solent in the case of the Isle of Wight, the English Channel in the case of Torquay, the Bristol Channel in the case of Weston-super-Mare, and Barry, St. George's Channel in the case of the ferry to Ireland, but I've never been to the Atlantic Ocean, or in fact any ocean prior. And we're back on the road again, leaving Cumnal Beach now and making our way back to Dingle. Well, the town of Dingle to be exact. The route this time was slightly different. It was a lot more scenic. This road is referred to as the Wild Atlantic Way and could arguably be Ireland's equivalent to the North Coast 500 up in Scotland. The roads were still narrow, mind you, but this time it felt more airy and open and far fewer hills on the horizon. However, that could be because we were on a hill, or the rest were behind us. The sun also came out later on, adding a gold tint to the hills and surrounding greenery. But despite all of that, we still stumbled across some civilization, a small village with a handful of buildings, and the buildings in question were large, and many of them were detached. There was even a hotel there. But then straight after that, it was back to the usual protocol of hills, crests, and greenery. Only this time with the added bonus of the sunlight. And to get to Dingle Town, we did have to get off the Wild Atlantic Way. We quickly stopped at Dingle and we had a look around the town as well as the harbour. The town itself was very colourful and very vibrant. It definitely had a lot of character, but it was also very small in size. So we didn't really stay there long. We did try to look around for some eateries. There was a chip shop, but we later decided we wanted something else. So we got back into the car and carried on driving. Making our way out of Dingle now, both the town and the peninsula. As I've mentioned, it's not exactly a big town, but we may stop by at another tourist attraction. But in the meantime, we do have this long road to follow. The good news is the road is no longer as narrow as it was earlier, and it was easier to maintain the speed limit. And gradually, the road started to become a bit more twisty and windy, making it a bit more befitting for a little bit of spirited driving. And since it was still on the way back, we did consider popping over to Inch Beach, but there was a big caveat. Whilst the weather was acceptable when we were at Cuminal Beach, later on in the afternoon the weather did take a turn for the worst. The tide was high, the wind was strong, and there was a very narrow margin, making content on the beach. But I still took the opportunity to potentially make Inch Beach content. Here we are approaching Inch Beach. This is the beach that Kumar actually recommended me to check out during the JCI meet from part 1, and he showed me a video of him driving on the beach. And yes, just like Cuminal Beach, you can actually drive down there via car. Unlike Cuminal Beach, there's a lot more sand there, and yes, you can take the car on the sand, and I somewhat make an attempt of it. Okay, so here I am at Inch Beach, also on the Atlantic coast. So I'm not really going to talk much because A, the water level. So I was going to film more in this beach, but A, the water levels are rising, and B, it's absolutely windy out there, and C, I keep getting sand in my eyes. So here are some photos taken on Inch Beach. Took various angles of the F-Type in Inch Beach, including one with me, but no filming for the rest of the day. And since we were in County Kerry, we then drove to Tralee, walked around the town centre, had some food there, prayed at their local mosque, and then did our 4-hour journey back to Wexford. Okay, day 3 in Ireland. So first we've checked main Wexford, we've also checked Dublin, and we've also checked the Dingle Peninsula in general. So we actually don't have a plan for today. Maybe somewhere nearby, like Wicklow. Weather in general has been brilliant throughout my time here, minus the wind, and possibly to an extent the temperature, but that is to be expected in April. Okay, a bit of an inconvenience that I came across last night. Whilst on our way back to Wexford, I've noticed a screeching sound coming from the right-hand side of the car, like a constantly at speed, and goes away whilst stationary. So I have a strong feeling that a stone or a pebble has been trapped within one of the brake discs. All it was this loose heat shield behind the front driver's side brake disc. Nothing too much of a concern. A huge thank you to Martin of Miller's Tyres for the service. It was only a small thing, but it really helped us a lot. We were able to get back on the road and make our way to our next destination, which was Enniscorthy. What's interesting is that many of these Wexford branded or Wexford labelled places that we were initially going to go to
on our first day were actually in Enniscorthy. And Enniscorthy was only about a 20-minute drive away, making it inevitable to be one of our locations for today. And with regards to the heat shield being refitted, a huge thank you to Motorfix of Cirencester for having that dealt with. Apparently it wasn't really needed. It's primarily there to protect a little bit of suspension component and wheel well plastics from extreme braking temperatures, as well as preventing water, road salt and debris kicking up by the tyres from directly hitting the brake discs. Otherwise, here's another footage of me driving through an Irish N-road, which was nice and straight and smooth. And as you can see, the roads were once again much wider than what we're used to in the UK. And just like I said, the views are absolutely breathtaking. And as you can see, lots of greenery around. Otherwise, judging by the footage, we are nearly at our destination. Also, not so fun fact, there's still bits of sand left from Inch Beach, even on the passenger airbag housing. I haven't really filmed anything here in Enniscorthy, so here are some photos that were taken whilst we were there. We were only there for about maybe an hour or two, took a few pictures of the car, parked up at the top of the hill. Yes, Enniscorthy was a very hilly town, and Enniscorthy had not one, but two places of worship. As I've mentioned, the county is called County Wexford, meaning Wexford is the main town. But judging by the sheer amounts of Wexford branding I've seen in this town, I'm assuming this will be the county's second town. Considering both the county council and urban council offices was based here, one of my favourite monuments here has to be the castle, which really stands out in the Enniscorthy skyline from the bottom of the hill. And just like Wexford, the River Slaney also flows through this town, albeit at the bottom of the hill. And I did admire the views of both bridges over there as well. Unusually, whilst we were down there, we saw a building and on the side was half a mini stuck to it. And after we finished looking around the town of Enniscorthy, we headed our way back to the top of the hill, got back into the car, and we checked what towns were also nearby. I had Wicklow and Waterford in mind, but they were a bit too far. Otherwise, I would have loved to see those two places as well. Back in the car now and making our way to our next destination, which is New Ross, which is also in County Wexford. So for this entire day, we are remaining local. Interestingly, the roads this way were much narrower than earlier. But that being said, the roads were still nice and straight, and the views were still very green, and the weather was still quite good. And because these roads are very straight, you can also see quite far, making the road look longer than it actually is. And I also like it when the road sort of goes into the horizon, making it look more dramatic. But just like the road to Enniscorthy from Wexford, this is all predominantly countryside. Once we got to New Ross town, I did a quick drive over the bridge, which oversees the New Ross skyline. And despite being on the cloudy side, the town did look very colourful. Immediately after that, we did find some space. We then parked up and looked around this town. Same protocol as Enniscorthy, we had a look around the town and took some photos whilst I was there. Once again, I did not really film anything whilst I was in New Ross, but it was very scenic there and very picturesque. The town hall was very nice, as well as a couple of alleyways, but there wasn't much to talk about regarding the town centre itself. I think the riverside was where it's at the most. And we did stop at a local bakery for some food. I have taken pictures of the F-Type, but this time afterwards because there were some parked cars whilst I was there, and luckily the parked car that was in front did move away, and interestingly they had a replica of the Dunbrody famine ship. Took a few photos with it whilst I was there as well. I've even taken pictures of the emigrant flame that was right by it, but we didn't stay in New Ross for very long. Made our way back to the hotel, and shortly after, as night fell, my dad and I made another visit to Iskender Grill and had a meal there. And I had the opportunity to take these low exposure photos of Wexford at night, which I think turned out very well. And shortly after that, I then parked up by the train tracks and took pictures of the F-Type over there as well. And I must say they do look very good. Took various angles, trial and error, different levels of exposure, but I'm happy with the results. And just before we made our way back to the hotel, we then pulled up once again and took photos of the county jail as well. Once again, various low exposures, and I really admired the green light. Finally clocked out of the hotel, and this is our final day here in Ireland. Here's a car we don't really see in the UK, a Corolla Cross. And of course, everything's going into the boot.
Leaving the hotel for good now, and quickly making our way to the nearest petrol station for one last fill-up. Whilst my dad was in the kiosk, he was told by the two colleagues there that they've never seen such a car before. They were equally surprised when they were told it's a Jaguar. Back on the road now, making our way to Rosslare from Wexford, not to the harbour, but to the town itself.
So I've parked up here in Rosslare, and this car park, not only is it free, but it's completely surrounded by palm trees. And especially from that angle over there, you wouldn't think we're in Europe. You'd think we're more somewhere in the Mediterranean.
You're right there.
And a local person even agrees with me. But yeah, from this angle, the whole scenery looks a lot more tropical and exotic.
Had a quick walk around the beach, had some photos taken over there as well as some palm trees found on Strand Road. But other than that, that was it with Rosslare. Otherwise, like I said, it did look very nice here, and it looked very exotic. And in a nice way, it did not look like I was in Ireland at all. Like I said, it could be somewhere in the Mediterranean.
Turns out Rosslare is a very small town. Once we finished looking at the coastal line and Strand Road, that was more or less it with this area. So we're going to head back to Wexford and spend more time over there.
Back in Wexford now, and this time we decided to not go into the main town centre, but rather an out-of-town retail park. Though that being said, we did miss the turning from earlier, hence we are driving through the centre of Wexford.
Okay, got lots of time to kill, and we pulled up in Wexford Retail Park, and I must say, I think we should have come to this area first, because this one retail park alone has all of these shops within this single car park.
So we spent the next few hours here in Wexford Retail Park. We had a quick lunch up in Costa, and interestingly, this particular Costa coffee shop had a second floor, so we sat there and had our food whilst taking a picture of the F-Type from that point of view as well. There was even a Tato van parked outside. We had a look around the other shops as well, but other than that, we still had a lot of time to kill. So we ended up going back to the centre of Wexford, and then we also stopped at Mercedes-Benz of Wexford to have a look at what they had on display as well. Interestingly, none of the cars there had multi-beams. And here's the driving footage of going back to the ferry. Am I glad I made this road trip? Yes. Will I ever do it again? Most definitely so. Am I glad I took the car via ferry instead of taking the flight? Of course.
Okay, so that concludes my stay here in Ireland. I am now back in Rosslare Harbour, waiting for the ferry to return to the UK. I hope you enjoyed watching me explore the Republic of Ireland.
and see me experience driving my own car in another country. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you are new, ring the bell to stay up to speed, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.